Welcome to PhD Perspectives. We have a lovely panel of speakers that we'll be introducing very shortly. But before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to our elders past, present and emerging. And just to introduce RACI, for anyone who hasn't heard about them, it's run by Chemist. And it's helping us network. And so it really helps you kind of learn a little bit more about what you can do with your life. And as the Early Career Chemist group, we are the New South Wales group. We're the official division of the RACI that is made up of students, graduates, and early career chemists. And we do events like these. We do some site tours. We do some career development workshops. And you can get involved by attending, being a RACI member and joining us as well. And yeah, so these are some of the events that we've had in the past. And yeah, so just to introduce our panelists. So we've got Dr. Kate Jolliffe, we've got Dr. Stephen Davies, we've got Bryce Mullins and Diana Zhang. So first things first, I'm gonna stop sharing. And let's introduce ourselves. So tell us a bit about yourselves, starting maybe with Kate and going in the order.
All right. So I'm Kate Jolliffe. I'm a Payne-Scott Professor of Chemistry at the University of Sydney. I did my PhD, I did my undergraduate at UNSW and then did my PhD also at UNSW. And I graduated in 1997, which is a really long time ago. Scary to think about. So I then went and postdocs in the Netherlands and then worked at the University of Nottingham in the UK before coming back to Australia. Worked at the Research School of Chemistry at ANU and then moved to the University of Sydney with an ARC Queen Elizabeth II Fellowship. Wow. That was in 2002. So I've been here for almost 20 years, which is also very scary.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I've previously been the head of School of Chemistry. I'm now just a teaching and research academic. I've supervised quite a few PhD students and honours students and master's students, so I have that perspective as well.
Awesome, that's really cool. And now Stephen.
Sorry, me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All good.
Yeah, sorry. Hi everyone. My name's Steve Davis. As you could probably tell from my accent, I actually did my my education in the UK. So I did my PhD in Durham, which is in the northeast of England, a little bit north of Nottingham, Kate. I did my undergraduate in North Wales. Then I travelled a little bit, actually. I was probably a little bit unusual in that respect. I went travelling to New Zealand and then I, for want of a better phrase, ended up in Australia. And then I ended up postdocing at Sydney University. So that happened for a while. I then did a few more postdocs, went back to England, and then I came back to Australia. And for the last 20 years, I've been working for the National Measurement Institute, which not many people have heard of. It's probably best described as it's a little bit like CSIRO, but we specialize in measurement. I think that's an apt description. And I'm a team leader of a scientific group, a group of chemists. And we basically make chemical reference materials for sports doping control and forensic testing. So all the stuff that the police are interested in, basically. So I'm not an academic, but I'm still working in a scientific chemistry environment.
And that's really cool. And like, love the little travel in the middle as well. Okay, awesome. And now Bryce.
Hi everyone, my name is Bryce. I am a second year PhD student in the School of Chemistry at the University of Sydney. I think Kate is probably just the level above me actually, so there you go. I did my undergraduate here at Sydney University. I did my honours here as well, and then I continued from my honours under the same supervisor. My PhD work is concerned with solid state chemistry. So we look for links between structures of materials and also their functionality. So to kind of put this into an everyday example, if you have like a lithium ion battery, for example, one of the cathode materials is lithium cobalt oxide. However, if we dope that with a different transition metal, so something like nickel, we can improve the properties of this. So we're trying to figure out why that's the case, why all these sorts of different structures can have different functionalities. And I'm kind of shared between a couple of different research groups doing all things from batteries to photocatalysis, electrocatalysis, all the way through to, we've got a project with storing of high activity nuclear waste with ANSTO as well, which is the Australian Nuclear Department.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. And Diana?
Hello, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Diana and I'm a current third year PhD student at the University of New South Wales. I did my undergraduate degree at UNSW. I spent 6 years doing a dual honours degree in music and science, but I also had a nice little stint in Kate's lab as a summer student as well. My current PhD is basically trying to develop more sensitive and accurate methodologies for potential screening of diseases. So in particular, I'm looking at Parkinson's disease and seeing if we can detect volatile chemicals from a simple skin swab.
Wow, that's really cool. And so, like, going on to the next question, and just out of curiosity as well, why did you want to do the PhD? What kind of drove you towards it? And we'll just kind of stick to the same order. So Kate first.
That's actually a really hard question for me to answer, Rima, because I have to say, when I went through undergraduate, I didn't even know that a PhD existed. So when I got to the end of second year and someone said, have you ever thought about doing honours? I was like, what is that? I don't know what that is. But that was a good opportunity for me to find out what it was. And I ended up actually doing my honours project with that supervisor, David Black, who some people at UNSW probably know. And I just discovered that I really liked doing research. And so I had no idea what I was going to do. But I really liked doing research, and there was a few discussions going on around the department about doing PhDs. And I was like, well, why not give it a go? See what it's like. This is fun. I'm having fun in the lab. 3 more years sounds like a great idea.
That's amazing. Yes. And also, you get to like just keep poking at the thing that you enjoy doing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
I check supervisors though.
Yeah. So any particular reason for that, or is that just kind of the way it went?
Yeah. So the reason that I changed supervisors between honours and PhD was nothing to do with me not liking my honours supervisor. In fact, he was a better supervisor than my PhD supervisor was. But it was about the science. So I was looking at the people who were working in the fume hood next to me and going, wow, what they're doing is really cool. I want to do that. And so I swapped supervisor. And my honours supervisor does not hate me. In fact, he's still a referee for me. So, it's definitely possible to do if anyone's out there wondering.
Definitely. I mean, I think we will potentially be going and tapping into that, but let's continue. So Steve, why did you decide to do it?
I think there were 2 reasons, really. One, I guess, wasn't very professional. A bit like Kate, I was just enjoying university life and thought, yeah, I could handle 3 more years of this. That was certainly one of my first thoughts. But when I was getting a bit more serious about it, realizing that I guess my parents wanted me to go out and earn some money, I looked into it, and I guess I kind of realized that this is back in England, of course, but if I was going to get, shall we say, a more exciting, challenging job in science, and I was definitely wanted to stay in science, then a PhD would be advantageous, basically. It was as simple as that. With just a bachelor's, I guess you could work your way up through companies, but the prospects weren't that exciting, to be honest. We The system in England was a bit different. I just did 3 years and got my bachelor's. It was cord and honours. We didn't do the extra year like Kate did. We did a little research project, and this was when I was in North Wales, which I enjoyed. But I actually ended up just changing universities. I didn't just change supervisors. I went to a totally different university.
Oh, wow.
Why, I don't really know. I mean, I was happy where I was, but I just fancied a change. And it turns out that my PhD was in a similar area to the little research project I'd done in honours. So it all worked out rather nicely. So as I say, there was one, I enjoyed being a student, and two, I thought maybe long term it would be advantageous for me from an employment perspective.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, that makes sense. And Bryce, why did you decide to make this choice?
It's very funny. So listening to Kate saying that, you know, it's a very hard question to answer. It seems like it doesn't matter how long ago you made that decision. It's still a very tough question to answer. Yeah, for me, so I did my 3 years of undergraduate, I did my year of honours, and then I basically got halfway through my honours year, and I realised that the sorts of things I was doing and the sorts of work that I was getting done, I was really enjoying, and it was something that I enjoyed coming to university every day to do. I enjoyed talking to my supervisor. I had the opportunity to go to a couple of conferences, and I got to talk about that sort of the work that I was doing in a broader context, in a larger picture as well, and that really appealed to me in order to do that. And I think I got right to the end of honours, and I sat down with my supervisor, who is still my PhD supervisor now, and we had a chat about a couple of things. And it was a meeting that I left and I felt very excited about, because, you know, we had all of these great ideas, we had things that we wanted to explore, which was fantastic. The second reason of mine is I come from rural New South Wales. I've got a lot of my family live on farms and things like that, and every time I'd go back and do farm work for them and things like that, you know, I'd get called a nerd and studying science, how dare you, and things like that. You're completely different. And then I found actually like I could do the battery technology and things like that. I could study those sorts of things, and, you know, it's something that I still go back home to Dubbo, and I see that the work that I'm doing now can actually have applications and things like that. And it's kind of like a little personal tie for me as well. I really enjoy that.
Yeah, that's really cool. It really helps to have like a personal passion for it as well. So that's cool. Yeah,
absolutely.
Awesome. And last but not least, Diana?
Yeah, thanks, Rima. I think I'll start by saying that, so I never considered doing, you know, a PhD to be an academic. I know that that's the pathway for a lot of people who want to, you know, continue being a lecturer. So I didn't need to do a PhD in order to gain, you know, placement in a job force, but I was just interested in creating impact and contributing to literature and, you know, being a part of societal impact in my own way in this field. So for me, being challenged by a PhD was what attracted me most and what really made me apply, because I was also applying for a music PhD scholarship as well. But ultimately, I felt that the impact that I could do through a chemistry PhD would outweigh that. So that's the pathway that I took. But also just kind of, it was fortuitous in the sense that I was able to get a good scholarship, and that really paved, you know, the financial aspects as well. So yeah, it's a bit of both. It's one part to create impact, but also the opportunities that was available to me that really helped.
Yeah. So would you have, if you were to have decided between the two PhDs, would it have been like definitely a PhD and not just go straight into work? Is that kind of what you were going with?
Yeah. So for me, I don't believe I would be intellectually challenged if I went straight to work. Yeah. Whereas currently I'm certainly being challenged by all means.
Definitely sounds good. Yeah. So, I mean, keeping in with that, what did you really enjoy about the program altogether? And starting with, again, Kate.
So, yeah, it was a long time ago. I don't remember.
Fair enough.
You know, I think I enjoyed, you know, being able to be intellectually stimulated, to think about what I was doing, to spend every Tuesday afternoon in the library reading the current literature, because that's what I used to do. No one does that anymore. But learning so much new stuff and then being able to try out new things in the lab, both of those really stimulated my interest. And I think that was the most enjoyable aspect of my PhD, was actually just being able to try out stuff and see what happened, like a proper scientist.
Fair enough. Yeah, I understand that. And Steve?
I think, I guess it was a, you know, as universities are, it was a young, vibrant environment. So as a young student, or, you know, it was just a great place to be, to develop your skills as a chemist, but also, you know, all the other stuff, the social stuff, etc. So, you know, it was just, I look back now and I realize that, you know, I really look forward to going in every single day. You know, we had I guess a really good group, doing, you know, I guess making an important contribution to science, which Diana mentioned. So it was just that being a part of a vibrant atmosphere, environment. And the other thing that always strikes me, I'm an organic chemist, you know, a synthesis chemist by training, and I still, like, I don't do that anymore. I just push paper around now because I'm a manager. But I still get a real buzz when my staff make a new compound and it comes out clean, and, you know, we can interpret the NMR and stuff like it. It's I'm not sure how to explain that, but yeah, I still, you know, 30 years down the track, I just love that.
Yeah.
So looking back, you know, those few new compounds that I made, I guess brought me a lot of pleasure, basically.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
It's just like, I've made this and no one else has.
And I guess in many cases, I'm the first person ever to have made them as well.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Bryce?
Yeah, I think both Kate and Stephen have touched on my 2 points. So the kind of thrill of discovery is certainly one of them. We in our research group, we have what's called a Friday, or fudge around, I suppose you'd call it. It's not the actual name, but we'll move on. Where we all sit down on a Friday afternoon, and we'll try and make a battery material from scratch, or we'll take a paper that was a useful catalyst and we'll put a different metal in there, and we'll basically come back and we'll see what happens. And we might, you know, every now and again we come up with something good. Every now and again it just turns into rubbish, and that's completely okay. It's just something that we all get together and do on a Friday. The other thing that's really good is certainly, and I think before I even started my PhD, I didn't think that I'd say this, but the social aspect is actually really good, and it's really important. You're around the same sort of people every day. You're around like-minded people. Like our research group, we only have a small research group. There's probably 7 or 8 of us here, but we have lunch together every day. And I think it was, I've spent this week at a conference as well, it was, you know, remote on Zoom, but it's not too bad, but it's another one of those little social things. We all went out to a conference dinner last night, and I met a whole bunch of new people. For dinner, I sat next to a beamline scientist from ANSTO and a postdoc from the University of Wollongong. Like, there's all of these things are really unique. I haven't really experienced them anywhere else apart from within my PhD program so far. So I've really enjoyed that for now.
Yeah, so it's like the social aspect, but also like the opportunities that like the quote unquote networking opportunities.
You might meet your best friend, you never know.
Exactly. That's amazing. Yeah. And Diana?
Yeah, apart from what's already been covered by my excellent panelists, I would say, so recently I participated in the Peter Farrell Cup at UNSW, which is an entrepreneurship program that's being offered. And one of the best things about doing a PhD is being able to see the research translation aspect. I think a lot of people may overlook the fact that you've created something in the lab, so then how can we take it to commercial market and actually apply it to society? So I think that's been a really exciting period of time for me in seeing how, you know, what's being developed in the lab can actually be used elsewhere.
Yeah, like the real world applications
That's right,
of what you're actually doing. That's amazing. Yeah. And you know, on the flip side of all of this, what did you find the most difficult about the program? So, Kate.
The reactions that don't work.
Oh, goodness.
You know, you sometimes in a PhD, in any research project, you run up against a wall, and it's hard, right? It's hard work to keep hitting your head against that wall every day until you finally crack through it, and that's probably the most difficult thing to do. I had a run-in with my supervisor at one point, but you know, I'm not the type of person to sit back and let somebody else say things about me that I don't think are true. So I went and reported that to the head of school, and the problem went away, basically. But you know, but I think that the most difficult thing was really just, you know, getting over that hump when things don't work, and how do you get yourself back into the lab to try it again the next day and tweak it a little bit to see if it does.
Yeah, definitely. And when it ultimately does work, like that feeling is also pretty cool, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's worth it. It's worth all those days of feeling bad, because when it does work, like Steve said, when you make that compound that no one else has made before and you've got that beautiful NMR, it's just such a good feeling.
Yes, exactly. Amazing. And Steve?
Yeah, I think Kate's hit the nail on the head, that I guess you need a certain mindset to be able to cope with the challenges and the difficulties, you know, and the disappointments, I guess. So there's no question that there's a scientific ability, but also a mindset required. When I first read the question, I thought I didn't find anything difficult because I just enjoyed myself. So, but then
That's fair.
I guess the most difficult thing for me was probably actually writing the thesis, because I enjoyed pottering around in the lab and throwing chemicals together and seeing what came out of that. But the writing of a book, your thesis, was actually something I guess none of us have done before.
Yeah.
And it was a challenge, you know. And so I guess if I had to choose something, that would be it.
Yeah. And
I guess taking it further now, like on occasion, we do try to publish in the literature. And I don't know whether it's just me, but, you know, writing coherent scientific papers is a difficult thing to do. And you need a writing skill, but also you need to make sure your science is really tight as well. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I think if I had to choose, I'd say the thesis writing, basically.
Fair enough. And did you also have that same sort of requirement of a certain number of papers while you were doing the PhD? Was it like thesis and papers writing at the same time?
I don't think it was a requirement. It was certainly favoured. I mean, obviously, my supervisor, I think, had been an academic for a couple of years, so young himself. So he was keen to get his career going. And I think the mindset was, of course, for all of us in the group to have, you know, some publications under our belt would put us in good stead for the future, postdoc somewhere or going into industry. So yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. I guess everyone wants to publish a bit of their work, you know.
Yeah, I'm going to butt in there actually and say it's still not a requirement to have publications out of your PhD. A PhD does not require you to have publications.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's kind of cool. That's good to know. But yeah,
I guess it's nice to think that after putting 3 years of effort in, you can, you know, have something out there in the scientific literature to say, hi everyone, here I am, and this is what I've done. So
yeah, definitely. That's pretty cool. But yeah. Okay. And Bryce, how are you finding it so far?
Yeah, I think I can probably build on Stephen's point a little bit more. Just rejection is very hard, and rejection is something that you experience a lot in your PhD, whether it is, you know, trying to submit a manuscript and it gets knocked back with revisions or something like that, whether it's a scholarship that you've spent, you know, a week applying for and you get desk rejected or something like that. It does happen. It will happen, and you kind of, it's really funny because it happens so many times that you kind of just get used to it. And yeah, that one time that it actually comes off, it feels amazing. So whether that's a an application, or it's a reaction that you're trying to do, or it's a material that you're trying to make. It's all the same common thread to me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, and Diana?
Yeah, so just to hammer home the message, you know, you're going to have experiments that don't work, and take it from the four of us, that's very common. But also just, you know, manuscripts just being rejected from journals and you have to resubmit to another journal, and, you know, all of that process, it can be demotivating, but certainly, you know, if you're doing honours right now, that's pretty much how your PhD is going to look anyway. So if you've survived honours, I think you're going to do fine for a PhD.
Fair enough, yes. And it might also be like character building almost. Yeah. And so in addition to all of that, so what surprised you most about the program? So, Kate.
I don't think I've got an answer to that question, actually.
Was it all a bit of a surprise?
Well, I guess because I went into it not really knowing what I was doing. I didn't really know what a PhD was, apart from, you know, having a chat to the people who worked in the lab with me, and we were all kind of muddling through together. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not sure that anything surprised me particularly.
That makes sense. Yeah, and Steve?
Not sure if surprised is quite the right word. Maybe it is the right word. But one thing that struck me almost from the first day was, like all of us, I guess, we'd finished our degrees. We'd done reasonably well because we were accepted into the PhD program. We probably all thought we were wonderfully intelligent chemists. I did, but maybe that. But what struck me straight away was the realization that you don't know very much at all. It's kind of interesting. You'd think I've just gone to university, I've got a degree, I'm a highly qualified chemist, and then suddenly you realize that you actually only know a very, very small amount. In fact, the more you know, the more you realize that you don't know.
Yeah,
that's what always struck me almost from day one, that maybe I wasn't quite as intelligent as I thought I was.
Yeah.
So that always sticks with me.
Yeah, that's kind of a good sort of, it changes your perspective on what you know, I guess, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was I think it was a valuable lesson, and I always look back, and even now, I mean, you just realize that we probably all work, and we might touch on this later on, but quite narrow fields, and you realize there's so much more out there that you're never going to have the time or the inclination to fully understand. But that's probably true for all professions. So
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And Bryce?
The thing that I've found most surprising is that a lot more people are actually interested in your work than what you realise, which is kind of a nice thing to find out at the start. When it comes to, people ask what you're doing. Oh, I'm a PhD candidate. Oh, what's it in? Oh, catalysis, battery, everything. Oh, that's interesting. Like we've got batteries on our farm that do this, or I've sold solar panels to people that have done X, Y, and Z, and all sorts of things like that. It's not until you kind of get right down to it, you realize how tangible the research that you're actually doing is. So especially I think the battery one's a big thing for that. The most common question I get on the back of that is people asking, oh, what's the next big technology? Like, what should I go and put my money into, and what should I invest in? And it's like, well, it's not particularly like that, but it's still like it makes it tangible. It's amazing when you realize that the work that you're doing actually has a lot of interest to the people around you, and people want to hear about it. It kind of gets on my nerves a little bit sometimes, because it's the same thing that you're doing day in and day out, but you've got to try and fluff it up and make it sound presentable and make it sound nice. But yeah, I've actually been really surprised by that. Everybody you talk to is really interested in what you're doing. They want to know what's going to come of it and what your next step is and things like that. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I guess it also forces you to think about how to explain it to someone who doesn't maybe have the same background, or doesn't work in the exact same field constantly.
Absolutely, that's exactly right. You got to figure out where you start from, and then you build the rest of the narrative up from there. That's exactly right.
Awesome. And Diana?
Yeah, I think the easy answer would be when an experiment works. That's always quite surprising. But no, just to add on to what Bryce is saying, I think it's incredible seeing the amount of collaboration that's possible. And it's possible when you reach out and just talk about your research to different fields of people. So for example, like my research, I also collaborate with engineering and also with computer science and trying to develop, machine learning methods for my data sets. So all of that has been possible because I reached out to people and talked about the research.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, just off the top, like off the back of that, I guess, it seems like you also have to interact with a lot of different people. Is that like the sort of skills that you kind of develop? And so, continuing on with that, the next question is, what sorts of skills do you feel that you developed from this program?
So I guess I get to go first again.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's the obvious answer is, the research skills, the ability not only to perform experiments, but to actually read literature, understand literature, pull the key messages out of what other people are saying about their research, and then thinking about how you can apply it to your research. But there's a whole heap of other stuff as well. So, critical thinking skills are, apply across the everything. But yeah, interactions with people. How do you interact with people who have different backgrounds to you, who have a completely different knowledge set to you? And how do you actually have a conversation with them? Is something that is a skill that you can develop in your PhD if you bother to talk to other people.
As opposed to staying in the library and just typing? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Or just sitting at your fume hood.
Oh gosh. Yeah. And Steve?
I guess following on from what Kate said, the one thing, it goes back to another point we made before as well, is that I had a PhD where pretty much after my first year, I hadn't made anything of value. And as you say, if you got the right mindset, that's okay. But the one thing that always strikes me is, I think that made me a better chemist, a better research chemist, because you have to troubleshoot the reactions. And as Kate said, you go to the literature, of course, they always report the good stuff, right? It worked, etc. And so I kind of believe very firmly that I'm a better chemist because I had to troubleshoot an awful lot. One of my fellow students was on a project where literally he would mix any two chemicals and get a complex and analyze it. So he had just positive result after positive result after positive result. But I don't think he actually ever had to troubleshoot anything because it all worked beautifully. And I wouldn't want to put that person down, but I often wonder whether actually they came out of it with the with the valuable troubleshooting skills that maybe I had to develop.
Yeah.
So that's what I think that was, for me, that was the most valuable thing I picked up.
Yeah, like the troubleshooting, but it also sounds a bit like resilience, like being able to go back and say, okay, this didn't work. How do I fix it? And go, oh my goodness, this didn't work. Why didn't it work? And go and actually want to read papers again.
Yeah, but I think it's also, as an organic chemist, and Kate can maybe back me up here a little bit, that you read a paper which compound A gets converted to compound B, but there's almost no reaction ever that it only does that. It goes to other things, or it doesn't go at all when the substrate is slightly different. So having an understanding of what should be happening, but also what else can be happening, which is messing you around, is important, I think.
That makes sense. Cool. And Bryce?
Yeah, one of the most valuable skills that I've learned is just the value of confidence, I suppose, when it comes to presenting your work, when it comes to networking with other people, when it comes to sending cold emails out of the blue and things like that. You have no idea just how far just a little bit of confidence can get you, things like that. That's both, you build that based on, you've done the lab work, you've done your appropriate literature reviews and things like that, so you know that you've got good foundations for the kind of the hypotheses that you're forming, and you've got good foundations for the work that you're doing, which is really important. And it's just building on that. I've really found that that's been a really valuable skill. And not only that, like I said, it continues over when it comes to trying to network with people, when it comes to trying to have a chat to people about different parts of their research. As a PhD student now, I cold email authors from papers and things like that and go, well, why'd you do this? And what effect did this have on that? And I would have never done that in honours. It was something that I never thought I would have been capable of doing. No. It's just amazing how it feels like overnight you just develop these skills, but really it's, you look back, you see it's actually quite a gradual change, and you build these sorts of things day in, day out until you basically don't realise it anymore.
Wow. Yeah, that just, you saying like cold emailing like authors of papers just filled me with dread.
It's a nightmare. Yeah, completely. But you get better at it.
Fair enough.
It fills me with dread too.
It's quite like oh goodness, but well. And Diana?
Yeah, I mean, apart from confidence building and writing skills and communication skills, I think it's such a perfect opportunity to take the time to learn different things. It could be learning a new instrument, it could be learning about coding or Python, like in my case, or it could just be trying to learn about a different field. And you don't get that time or that opportunity elsewhere, but a PhD is just the perfect time to do that.
That's really cool. Yeah. Wow. And this may apply more to Kate and Steve, but did you get any opportunities to study abroad?
So not during my PhD, but in between honours and PhD, I actually spent 3 months in a lab in Denmark. Cool. So that was just kind of 20, 30 years ago, there wasn't really the exchange programs that exist now that are much more popular in universities. There wasn't really that much of an opportunity, but my honours supervisor contacted somebody and said, this person's really interested in coming over and working. She's happy to pay her own airfare. Would you be interested in having her work in your lab for a few months? And it worked.
That's pretty awesome. That's really cool. And how did you enjoy the experience?
I really enjoyed it. I specifically went to Denmark because I had been an exchange student, a Rotary exchange student at school. I spent a year in Denmark already. I spoke Danish, still speak Danish, but it's really rusty now. And so I kind of thought that would be a good place for me to go because I wouldn't have the difficulty of not speaking the language and all of that sort of stuff. And I like travel. I just wanted to go and try something different.
Yeah, exactly. That totally makes sense. Yeah. And Steve?
I guess like Kate, not really during my studying, but I guess one of the reasons I now live in Australia is that when I came here, my story is slightly different to most people's, but I ended up getting a postdoc at Sydney University. So I guess that that was part of my travels, but it allowed me to stay here for a number of years. Yeah. And again, it was obviously a fantastic way of meeting people. I've got many close friends from that time who they're still my friends, which is good. And also the other thing, of course, as a scientist, you just see how different people do the same thing. They might do it differently, sometimes better, sometimes not as well. So it's a great opportunity to learn, but also exchange ideas and pass on your knowledge to people as well. So yeah, so that's how I guess I got to travel.
Yeah, and especially like after because I think you mentioned that you went to New Zealand and then you ended up in Australia. So how did that kind of happen? Was that more of personal travel experiences?
Yeah, it was. I think we're going to come. Maybe the next question is part of the answer to this. I'm a bit, I guess my story is a little bit different, I guess, to most people. I finished my PhD and had a great time, like probably arguably the best time of my life, or certainly up there. And for some reason, I didn't know what to do with my life. And so I went traveling, and I spent a year in New Zealand traveling. I come from a rural area in England, so I picked fruit in New Zealand. I basically picked, I was on the kiwi fruit, I was on the apples, and I loved it. It was fantastic. Arguably one of the best things I've ever done. And then I came to Australia, and to cut a long story short, I ended up walking into Sydney University one day and asking if there's any postdoc work, and there was a lot of money at the time. So I ended up working with Max Crosley, who you may or may not have heard of.
Mm-hmm.
And absolutely bizarrely, he'd just come back from a conference in Durham and met my supervisor literally the week before.
Amazing.
And I walk in with a pair of shorts and a singlet on, saying, any chance of some work? That's probably not important really, but what did strike me really strongly was I'd taken this year off, which was brilliant. And when I got back into the lab, I suddenly thought, yeah, I've missed this. This is what I want to do. And to be honest with you, I was really surprised by that. To be honest with you, I just needed work because I was traveling. But when I got back in the lab, I just went, wow, yeah, I really miss it. So
yeah, this is home.
Shall we say, a slightly unusual approach to my career, but it worked very well for me. Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily advocate it for everyone, but hey, it worked great for me, basically.
Yeah, that's amazing. But yeah, and Bryce and Diana?
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add to this, unfortunately. I mean, well, I started my PhD at the start of last year, and
yeah,
I was told about all of these opportunities, and then they just kind of seemed to disappear as quickly as I was told about them. So,
oh goodness.
However, in saying that, I had the great opportunity of visiting a conference up on the Gold Coast in my honours year, and that was just got given the opportunity to do that. I won a prize at a local conference, and the prize for that was to go up to the domestic one up on the Gold Coast. And it was just, I went up there for 3 days. It was just myself, and I had an absolute ball. It was a fantastic time. So those sorts of things can happen. Those opportunities can come around. It's just a matter of you essentially have to take people up on them whenever you get the opportunity.
Yeah, and ideally not be studying during a pandemic. And Diana, have you had any experiences so far?
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate to have the Fulbright Scholarship for 2021, and that would mean I will be going to Boston for about 4 months at the start of next year, and that will be contributing to my PhD work. And I'm just really excited to have that opportunity to go overseas, because that's always been a dream of mine, but also just to learn about, different areas of research from there. And also, I would also just point out is if anyone is interested in applying for the Fulbright, please do contact me, because the applications close in July.
Amazing. Awesome. Yeah, and so I mean, we touched on this a little bit, but how was the experience of finding work after the PhD? Was there a lot of people who were kind of doing PhDs in similar fields that you felt like you were competing against maybe as well? Yeah.
So I mean, I went from my PhD to a postdoc basically about a year before I finished my PhD, probably 9 months or so. I talked to a few people. I kind of knew the area of chemistry I wanted to work in. I'd seen some great seminars on supramolecular chemistry, molecular muscles, molecular machines, and I was like, this is what I want to do. Yeah. So I talked to a couple of people in the department at UNSW, and they gave me a few names, and I basically just wrote letters to these people and said, I'm really interested in doing a postdoc. And I sent out, I don't know, 10 letters or something, and most of them either didn't get a response or got a very polite, well, that's great, but we don't have any money. But one came back positive. It was the first email I ever received, and the first email I ever sent was accepting my postdoc position. Yeah, I mean, there were lots of other people graduating with PhDs at the time, and we were all doing the same thing. Some of us were writing to the same people.
Oh goodness, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, and Steve?
Well, I've told you I guess my first postdoc story, so that was fortuitous, I guess. Right place, right time, took advantage of it. Looking back on my career, maybe I postdoc for a bit too long. I had other postdocs. I'm not saying it was the wrong thing to do, but it wasn't necessarily the right thing to do. I guess had I stayed in academia, maybe it would have been a better, but anyway, that's the way it was. That was life. So I didn't have a problem getting postdocs. I did struggle for a couple of years to find work, like my current job.
What was the transition from postdoc to the current job that you're in?
I worked on a building site for 2 years.
Wow, okay.
I laboured on a building site for 2 years, which, again, that was actually an interesting experience. It was a bit of a mixed bag. I needed work, obviously. I was as fit as a fiddle. I was a labourer, so in that respect, it was extraordinary. But of course, you know, what started off as a bit of fun suddenly became 6 months, became a year, became 2 years. So it started to lose its appeal. It was character building, I guess. And just looking at the questions there, that like, one thing that was a bit disappointing was when I was looking for work, being told I was overqualified.
Yeah.
I honestly don't feel like I'm overqualified. Well, certainly for the job I've got now, I'm not overqualified. I'm perfectly qualified. But so that was a bit disappointing. And again, I was, I guess, a bit lucky because my current manager was a close friend I'd met through Sydney University, and she needed someone with my skills, and they had a 3-month position. So I took that just to get my hand, you know, my foot in the door, they say. And like everything else, the rest is history. A permanent position came up while I was there. I applied, I was given that job, and as I say, that was 20 years ago now. So maybe I've had 2 moments of being in the right place at the right time in my life. But, you know, it's a case of making the most of what comes your way. So
Definitely.
yeah.
And I mean, not yet, but Bryce, what are you thinking for the future?
I was just thinking that. I was wondering how I was going to answer that question. I still don't really know how I'm going to. So,
fair enough.
Yeah, it's funny that Stephen was talking about, you know, going and doing labouring work for 2 years. I remember doing bar jobs and labouring and things whilst I was doing my honours. And whilst I was doing that, I remember I was, you know, balancing those jobs. I would do an extraordinary amount of hours at uni, and then would back it up and work from, you know, 5 p.m. till 2 a.m. in a pub most nights just to try and pay rent and things like that. So, but at the same time, though, it's like I think back on it now, and that was some of the most fun that I had during honours. I think it was knowing that, you know, you would basically go from a strictly academic environment to the pub environment, basically, and it was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. Yeah, so things like that happen. I remember doing lab demonstrating, things like that on the side, and I remember weighing up the lab demo job and the pub job and thinking, no, this uni thing's for me. I actually really enjoy doing this. So yeah, that's my little short anecdote.
Yeah. And are you doing any sort of work like as tutor and those types of things at the moment?
So at the moment I am. So I still do my my lab demoing, and I take first year tutorials as well, which is very good fun. I probably have about 12 hours a week of teaching, I think, which is on top of the normal PhD research work, and I absolutely love it. I'm sure teaching will come up later on, but it's something that I really enjoy.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. And Diana, have you thought about this?
Yeah, look, I think trying to be overqualified is something that is probably a question on a lot of people's mindset before doing a PhD. I think in general, though, like if you are applying for a job and they say that you're overqualified, maybe that job is not for you, or that's, you know, it's not where you're meant to be. I think what's really great about PhD is you get to really own your project and really get to see it through. And for many people, that's kind of like being in the workforce, right? That you're being put in charge of something, that's a responsibility. And how you present that to a potential employer is, I think, the best way to demonstrate your experience. But also just like the level of critical thinking that you get from doing a PhD is not going to be anywhere near the same as someone else in industry. So I think if you think that you may be overqualified, that shouldn't be your concern.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just like fielding a question from the audience. We've gotten a question that's like, with the growing number of people doing a PhD, do you think a PhD has the same weight in terms of being advantageous for employment? So let's go around. So, okay.
So yeah, I think this refers back to a comment that Steve made when he was talking in the answer to the first question about having a PhD made you more employable. And I still think that is actually the case. For a lot of positions, the skills that you develop, those critical thinking skills that Diana just touched on, make you more qualified for a lot of jobs. There might be more people with PhDs, but there's a whole lot of people out there who don't have PhDs as well. And there's more of them than there are of you.
Fair enough. Yeah. Awesome. And Steve, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's hard. I realise when, you're Bryce and Diana's age, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. If you want to stay in science, if you want to participate in research in science, then there is no question that having a PhD will be beneficial. Like, it's not universal, but for instance, at the NMI, most of the top management people have PhDs. So it's if you're that's what interests you, then it's definitely advantageous to have a PhD if you're staying in science. I guess if you don't want to stay in science, then I would say don't rule it out, because it should be an enjoyable experience, etc., etc. But I suspect it's probably long term, it's not going to be quite so valuable to you. That'll be my gut feeling. But as I say, we're everyone here is a scientist, right? So if you want to have a career in science, then I would say you should give it some thought, basically.
Fair.
Yeah, I'm going to also add that, having supervised a lot of PhD students and postdocs, lots of them don't work in science anymore. Some of them work in like patent attorney stuff where they use their science background. Some are science teachers. But I've also got graduates who work in finance industry, and their PhD, the skills that they learn in critical thinking in their PhD is actually what got them those jobs.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I've heard from working outside of science. So it's definitely an interesting thing, especially with the coding and the maths knowledge, as far as I've heard. Yeah, awesome. And Bryce and Diana, do you have anything to add or thoughts?
Not so much on my end. I think a lot of my evidence is strictly anecdotal, I think. So I've heard from all sorts of industry partners and things like that. Like I've heard stories of, if you have a PhD, you're more likely to climb the ladder in those sorts of startup companies and things like that. But like I said, that's to be taken with a grain of salt. I've not having actually done that myself, I can't confirm nor deny. So
Yeah, I would start by saying kind of the counter argument, right? Like, you see the same number of commerce graduates or law graduates, if not, it's increasing by the year, and yet the number of lawyers are the same. So I think what it boils down to is who you are and how you're going to really build yourself, and especially in the different skill sets that you could potentially try and learn from. So I think a PhD, as I was saying before, is the perfect opportunity to grasp the time that you have to just, develop your mindset. So that's all I'll say.
Awesome. Cool. And for the next question then, so would you have any advice for someone who's finished honours but don't really know what they want to do yet in terms of PhD? Starting with Kate again.
So yeah, I think it's, you know, a PhD is a big commitment. So we've all been talking about how great it is and how much we enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But it is a big commitment. It's 3 years, closer to 4 years for most people. So it's a big undertaking, and you have to think pretty seriously about whether that's what you want to do or not, because if you don't want to do it, if it turns out that you don't want to be there, it's going to be the most miserable time of your life. You can push through, but you're not going to be happy. So if you're not sure, you know, think about it. Think about what you want to do, where you want to go. Don't just do a PhD for the sake of doing a PhD. Do it because you like the research process, because you're interested in the science. It might not be the same topic as your honours project, but talk to other people about it as well. Talk to supervisors, talk to PhD students, find out what it's like before you commit.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And do you think that there's a particular sort of, there's value in looking into the research area that you're looking into? And is it someone who's, like, for someone who, like when it comes to choosing the research area that you're looking into, is there a particular sort of navigation that you should maybe be doing? I'm trying to word that as nicely as possible.
So I think I have quite strong opinions about this. I think there are a couple of things that you need to think about. The first one is that you're going to be working really closely with a supervisor for the next 3 to 4 years of your life. And if you can't have a working relationship with that person, then don't choose them as their supervisor, even if they're a Nobel Prize winner. That's, you know, it's just going to end in tears. So that's my primary consideration, actually. And then the second consideration is, you know, yes, you might think you're interested in a research area, but what you'll probably find is that as you find out more about other research areas, you'll discover that they're equally exciting, or there's stuff that you haven't even thought of before. So I actually think research area, you know, people either think they want to be an organic chemist, or they want to be an inorganic chemist, or they want to be a physical chemist. And some people are better suited to each of those things, or you just like them more than the other. So go for the general area, but don't get so fixated on, you know, being the first to design a cancer drug that you work with someone who you can't actually work with.
That makes sense. Definitely. And Steve, do you have any advice?
I think Kate's just said everything I wanted to say, and summed it up perfectly. Clearly, I agree with her 100%. If you're in two minds, if you're not sure, it's really, you have to really want to do it. Otherwise, it has potential to be a complete grind, as Kate said. The area, I mean, I, as I said before, I changed universities, so I didn't know the academics at the university I went to. I guess I was lucky. I went for an interview. I use that term loosely. It was just a bit of a chat. And I guess I was just lucky. I just realized straight away that I could work for the guy who became my supervisor. And I guess maybe I've got an ability to assess people quite quickly, and I was spot on in that respect. I think Kate's absolutely right. If working for the wrong person would just be horrible. Heard stories about things like that. Topic, I guess you're definitely either going to be, as Kate said, an organic chemist or an inorganic chemist or a physical chemist, whatever. The actual topic of your research probably at the end of the day isn't so important. What you realize, of course, is that you're working in a very narrow field, and it's not so much about, oh yeah, I made compounds A, B, and C. It's what you've developed, what you've learned to be able to do that. It's not actually, I can make, as I say, compound A. It's the fact that I can go into the library, I can digest the literature, and I can then apply my skills to solve that problem. That's the important thing, I think. Yeah. So,
and is,
I mean, I since doing my PhD, I've never given my the topic, you know, a moment's thought, essentially, because I've moved on to other things, you know.
Yeah.
It was important at the time.
Yeah.
I felt like I was contributing to an interesting area, but I haven't given it a moment's thought until this evening for 30 years. So,
Yes.
you know.
And I think, do you still have the thesis like very close to you?
I
Okay.
had to look at the title as I was telling the guy before, because I forgot what it was.
Amazing. Yeah, you need to like flash it up and show us how thick it is and
Oh, do
everything.
I? My thesis. Yeah.
Yes, amazing. Awesome. Yeah. And Bryce?
Yeah, I think something that we haven't particularly touched on yet is that your honours year is the perfect kind of trial run for how a PhD is actually going to work. It's the first time essentially in your entire undergraduate where you're not stuck doing coursework, or depending on what you're doing, you're not doing a whole lot of coursework compared to what you usually do in your undergrad. But you develop all of these independent skills, like you like what you've said before, you digest the literature and you come up with your own experiments and things like that. And it's just it's a completely different way of thinking compared to the first couple of years of your undergrad. And that was something that really surprised me. That was something that I wasn't particularly expecting. And it was something that, it's a little bit like sink or swim. You have to get very good at it very quickly if you want to go anywhere with your honours.
Yeah.
I remember I got to basically halfway through my honours, and that was when I kind of started to realise that I was actually really enjoying what I was doing every day. I was enjoying coming in, and I was having a chat to one of the final year PhD students in my research group. I was like, hey, like you're working on this really cool stuff. Like, you're working under the same supervisor as I am. Like, how is he as a supervisor? Is he a good mentor and things like that? And it's those sorts of chats that you don't really put a whole lot of emphasis on, but they're really, really important, and you need to have a lot more of them with people like that. And he gave me this great advice, and it was, you'll get to 3/4 of the way through your honours, you'll get to the end of honours, and you'll have this little light bulb moment of like, hell yeah, I want to do this, or not particularly, this is not really for me. And I think that kind of echoes everything that Kate and Stephen have already said. It's something that and it's something that, it's not for the faint of heart, and it's not something just to sit there and grind through for 3+ years, because you're not going to get out of it what you think that you'll get out of it. And I think that's essentially what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And Diana?
Yeah, so just to echo on what Kate was saying as well, do you have the will to do it? That's the first thing. The second thing in choosing which kind of supervisor to go through, I mean, obviously talking to them and making sure that you can potentially work with them for 3 to 4 years is super, super important. But also don't overestimate, talking to the PhD students in that group, because more often than not, talking to the supervisor, they'll give you a very rosy, idea of what a PhD is going to look like. But the people who are actually doing it are going to be the PhD students. So try and talk to them and see, how are they feeling? How are they going? But also, if possible, try and look for potential PhD graduates and see where they are now, and see if that kind of career pathway is where you see yourself, or if it's something that you can potentially do. So those are my 3.
Awesome. Yeah. And just another question from the audience. So is there anything that you wish you did in your undergraduate course that would have better prepared you for your PhD studies? Starting with Kate again.
I think that is the thing that I did, which was to take the opportunities that I was given to do some research while I was an undergrad, which really was what prompted me to think, oh, this might be an interesting thing to do. So if there are opportunities to try research out as an undergrad, then definitely take those.
That's awesome. Yeah. And Steve?
Not really. I've never thought back. I mean, I guess as I've developed as a scientist, as a chemist, I realized that maybe I could have done with understanding things a lot better than maybe I did when I was at university. But I guess maybe that's true for us all, as we develop our skills, our understanding. I mean, the one thing I like about my job at the moment is that we have a problem in the lab, you read up about it, and you have that eureka moment, and I go, so that's what they were telling me in those lectures, which is probably a bit of a sad reflection on me, but that's probably the one thing maybe I wish I'd have had better understanding when I was Bryce and Diana's age, but that's life, I guess.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. And Bryce?
It's funny that you say that, Stephen, because I still have those moments even now. Even when I sit down and learn a first year tutorial sheet for the first time, I still look back and go, oh, when I was doing this X amount of years ago, that's what they were trying to get us to do. Oh, this makes so much sense now. So yeah, that still happens. Don't worry about that. My advice for this is slightly left of centre, and that is what I found with my undergraduate studies was I worked all the way through, so I had part-time jobs. And I found that really helped when it came to things like time management. I could throw things like social skills in there as well. And it's really, really helped me. And all of those sorts of things that I used to do back then in terms of managing time and in terms of making sure that you've got enough hours in a day to get everything done. I still do that even now in my PhD. So that's slightly different to what the other panelists have said so far, but I can't recommend it highly enough. All of those skills have helped me so much.
Amazing. Yeah. And Diana?
Yeah, and just to tag on to Bryce's comment, I think, as a highly driven and kind of an A student back when I was doing my undergrad, I think I definitely spent way too much time in the lab as an honours student. And I think I very much overlooked, the importance of mental health. So I think that's something that if I were to go back and do my honours again, I definitely would have taken more time for myself, as Bryce was saying, just kind of, really looking after yourself, because research can be quite consuming.
Yeah, definitely. Like factoring in the, okay, we need actually got like 8 hours sleep is actually good for you. Fair enough. And just as we are getting kind of closer to the end, so what advice would you have for a student who wants to do a PhD but isn't sure exactly which research group to join? I think we've touched a bit on this in the past, but any other sort of thoughts or opinions, like anyone?
Yeah, I think I've said all the things about that I wanted to say.
Fair enough. Yeah. And yeah, anyone else has any other thoughts?
I think I'll just add that, a PhD is actually quite flexible. So, there are so many opportunities to create those interdisciplinary connections and collaborations. So don't feel like, by choosing chemistry, you're just stuck in here. There are actually multiple opportunities to branch out.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And Stephen, I think you were going to say something.
I was just going to, I guess, echo what Kate's already said, that it's 3-4 years of your life, and you need to make sure that you're compatible with the supervisor, their personal style, their whatever. I mean, obviously all supervisors are academic, so they have interest in research areas, but so there's a compatibility requirement there for certain.
Mm-hmm.
You do want to be interested in the research project. I think Diana made the very valuable point that it's certainly nice to think that you're doing something of value. So that's important for your to build up your morale, your enthusiasm for the whole thing. And I think again, I'm just echoing what others have said. You'd be advised, I think, to go and speak to the students. Who are already working in that group, and just it's like probably true for jobs as well, just saying what's it like here.
Yeah.
And if the overwhelming response is positive, I love it, then hey, that sounds good. If everyone moans about the boss or the work conditions, then you might want to think twice about that, because as Kate said, it's 3 to 4 years of your life. So you need to work hard to get a qualification, but you need to enjoy it. If you're not enjoying it, then it's going to be of very little benefit to you.
Definitely. And Bryce, do you have anything to add to that?
Not particularly. I think the only piece of advice that I have with that is that there's really no magic formula to it. I've spoken to lots of people who talk about, this supervisor has 3 postdocs working under them, and they've got 4 PhD students, therefore they must have the best research group. It really doesn't work like that. It's so important to touch on what Stephen was saying. You have to have that personal connection with your supervisor. You have to be able to know that your styles of work are compatible and things like that. We've got students in our research group now that are reaching out to potential supervisors over in the UK. They're always happy to talk to students and things like that. I don't know how you're like, Kate and Stephen, but I certainly know from my own experience, dropping people a line via email, it's a lot of the time they'll get back to you, and a lot of the time they're happy to chat about these sorts of things.
Yeah, definitely. And normally, you know, I will suggest to people who contact me that they also have a chat to the people in my group as well, because everybody's different, right? So I have a different style of supervision to the person across the hallway from me. And some students will find it better to work for me, but with me, but other students will find it better to work with that other person because their styles match up better. So you do have to take your own personality into account as well.
Yeah, definitely. You don't want to have like any personality clashes. But yeah, and so just following on for that, so for someone who's just starting their PhD, do you have any particular advice, things that you wish that you knew, or regrets, or things about internships, that sort of stuff?
Bryce touched on this, develop good time management skills. That's a key skill that you need at the start of your PhD that will make life easier over those 3 to 4 years. Absolutely 100%. If you're efficient and effective in the use of your time, you can feel like you can do your PhD, but also get 8 hours sleep a night. I did. I didn't work weekends for most of my PhD. I didn't work late nights for most of my PhD. I'm very efficient when I'm in the lab.
That's amazing. Yeah. And Steve?
I think one of the most important things is, we've touched on this before, it's kind of making sure you really understand, I guess, the science. And, you know, when things work, obviously that's good. And you followed a literature procedure, it's worked, but you should understand why it's worked. You know, make sure you really understand why that reaction worked, because where it becomes really important is trying to work out when it doesn't work. So really understanding the chemistry. You know, we can all bake a cake if we've got a recipe. Okay, we can all do that. Anyone could do that. You can find someone on the street to do that. So I think the important thing in a PhD is not just doing the bench work, but really making sure you understand the chemistry behind the successes and the failures. And I'm a firm believer that will mean that when you've finished, you'll come out as a good scientist. You know, you'll be able to troubleshoot things, which is ultimately what it's about. Using your scientific knowledge, but able to troubleshoot problems, and that's going to make you a very valuable employee, and I suspect Kate might agree, a very good academic, basically.
Definitely. And Bryce?
I think it's important that the skills that you learn throughout all of your undergrad and through all of your honours and things like that, I think it's important not to take them for granted once you get to your PhD. So I was once told that, you know, being given a gift is like being given a horse, except you still need to learn how to ride it. You still need to touch up on these things every now and again. So I still put aside an hour a week. I sit down and read a new paper. I do all sorts of things like that. I'm just keeping those skills ticking over, which I think is really important. Especially when you're doing a PhD, you're going to be doing it for 3 or 4 years or something like that. It's easy to fall into habits, and not only just habits, but bad habits as well. So it's really important that you make sure that you're still going over like all the things that basically got you to where you are today, because you still need to refine all of those sorts of things. The second thing I'll add to that is what I found very recently is to establish really good organizational skills as well. So when you make a product in the lab or something like that, don't just put it in a vial and put it in a drawer somewhere. Please label it. Please make a note of where it is. I'm continuing on the work of a previous PhD student of my supervisors, and I just got handed this like box of samples basically. They're all poorly labelled. I've got no idea how they were made or anything like that. So if you're doing good work, please have good organisational skills. Please label things, because you never know when it will come back up again.
Yeah. And if you're an organic chemist or a synthetic chemist, characterize your compounds as you go along. Don't wait till the end. It took me 2 postdocs to work that out. It's way faster to do it at the start.
It's amazing how many things look like white powders.
Amazing. Yeah, and Diana?
Yeah, just to continue on Bryce's comment as well, like keeping a very good notebook is very important. I think people can sometimes just choose, oh, like I can just write on a piece of paper and I'll just transfer it. But no, just try and stay organized in doing that is not only going to be helpful for students after you, but potentially if it's a patentable, compound or whatever it might be, and a very good notebook is very important. I think, I don't know, what other kinds of advice would I give? I think it's good to know as well that in your first year PhD, there is that time flexibility to just explore different things, and you're able to try new things, because that's probably the best time in your PhD to be kind of exploring more.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds an awful lot like you get that soft skill of just managing yourself and being able to actually control how much time you spend on things and not just kind of get stuck. So that's really cool as well, definitely. And so the last 2 questions is, what would you say to students who started their program potentially is finding it a bit tricky? How would you support them and help them?
So I've been postgraduate coordinator over the last few years in School of Chemistry. So I've had this conversation a lot of time. Yeah. I think it's really important to just stop and take stock of where you are, what's important to you. And, you've got a couple of choices. You can keep going and just push through. You can take advantage of the counselling services that are available, which might help you to find the motivation to actually keep going. Yeah. You can suspend your candidature. You can go to part-time candidature to give yourself a little bit more time and flexibility to just work stuff out. So there's lots of options. So, but you probably don't know what those options are. You need to talk to people about it.
Definitely. And likewise, Steve?
I guess I'm not really, well, unlike Kate, I'm not an academic, so I'm not having PhD projects. We do have students every now and again. From a work perspective, of course, not quite an answer to this question, but we have an obligation to look after the well-being of our staff, physical through OHS, and Diana touched on this, the mental health. So it's to no one's advantage to see a member of staff or a student getting, I guess, ill, whether it be mental or physical, as a result of the work. That's not going to help anyone. It's not going to help the supervisor. It's not going to help the student. So, it's just as a decent human being, you just need to step in there and try and help out. I guess looking back at my PhD, I suppose I was lucky. I was quite resilient and just was enjoying it, so it wasn't an issue for me. I would imagine if I had a student now where the project was going particularly badly, you have to start maybe helping a little bit, thinking of other ways to tackle the problems. And I must admit, again, I'd be interested in Kate's opinion here, but obviously you want positive results to write up a thesis. That's kind of that's the objective of the work. But I've always been a firm believer, I touched on this before, to me, that's not always the most important thing. You might get negative results, but as long as your approach to overcoming those negative results is sensible, scientifically robust, then to me, that's a good thing. It's showing that you're applying your knowledge to a problem. let's be fair, you go to conferences and someone tried 20 different ways of oxidizing an alcohol to a ketone. Just because it doesn't work for you on that particular molecule doesn't make you a bad chemist. It's just unfortunate, and that in my view is chemistry. It works beautifully on substrate A and it works terribly on your substrate. So but ultimately we all have a responsibility at the workplace, whether it's academia or wherever, NMI, to look after the well-being of our colleagues. That's
definitely.
what I would say.
Yeah, and also maybe depersonalize some of the results that you're getting as well, and turn it into a learning experience rather than this is a me problem. And Bryce and Diana, do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, just as a short aside to that, it's amazing how often that those processes of failure are actually so important. I remember there was a time in my honours where we had come up with this really good idea for a particular catalyst, and I sat in the lab and I tried 3 or 4 different times to make it and it never worked. And then I sent an email to a lab over in Japan and I got an email back that said, oh, we've been trying to make that for 10 years, it doesn't work. So it's amazing how, like, we talk about the importance of failures and things like that. Like, no result is still a result. That's really important. I know Kate, as postgrad coordinator here at the University of Sydney, she's touched on all of the hard subjects, so things like mental health and support services, things like taking periods of leave and things like that. More on the softer side, I found that even just doing a small little change in your environment or something like that can have a tremendous beneficial effect on what you're doing. I remember when I came back from, I was in that little awkward period between finishing my honours and starting my PhD, I moved desks for a couple of months, and that was really refreshing for me. It just gave me just a little bit of a change of environment, and it was really, really nice. I think even now with, given that people are starting to work from home more a little bit as well, just that little change of environment a couple of days a week, it's actually really quite refreshing. And that you'll be surprised that, because you can get bogged down on particular problems where you just sat at your desk focusing just on that, or you're, like Kate said before, you're just sitting in the fume hood, just focusing, trying to synthesize product A or product B. It's amazing how that change of environment can just bring a little bit of clarity to what you're doing.
Definitely. Yeah. And Diana?
Yeah, apart from things that have already been mentioned, I'll just say quickly that having a very good support network whilst doing a PhD is very important. So that might include, your family, very good friends or partners or whatever it might be. Having those people to turn to and to be able to talk to if you have any problems is going to go a very long way for you.
Definitely, I agree. And lastly, just to finish off in the last couple of minutes, what would you say to a student who started their program and is absolutely loving it?
Keep going.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Amazing. Yeah. And Steve?
Yeah, just make the most of it, basically. I mean, you're in a good place, so enjoy it, work hard, and yeah, as I say, just make the most of it. It's good on you, I guess, would be the best way of putting it.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. And Bryce?
I still kind of think that's me, even a year and a half in. I'm still kind of waiting for one day for the shine to wear off, and it still really hasn't yet. So yeah, that's all it really comes down to. Make the most of that time. You're going to be the most productive when you're enjoying the work that you're doing. So get in there and get it done. That's all it comes down to.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. And Diana?
Yeah, I was going to give a heart react on Zoom and then I realized I couldn't react because I'm on the panel.
Oh,
but
no.
yes, that would have been my reaction.
Awesome. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And thanks to everyone who's watching as well at home. It's really, really great to be able to just, have this discussion and have people watch it as well. So yes, awesome. Thank you. And I think we're just 2 minutes early. So yeah, great. Great timing. Awesome. Thank you so much and have a lovely evening.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks everyone. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks.